water is a commodity, and it's an important for obviously for people and for industry, but it's important for the environment too. And desalination offers an opportunity to generate that water while minimizing environmental impacts of taking water out of rivers that come to our bays and estuaries. We are very concerned, of course, about having fresh water coming into our bays because it keeps them healthy, and therefore we have fish and all the economic benefits we believe in and need. So desal can be an answer to helping make sure that happens. Frankly, water is the most important resource issue in this state, far more important than oil, frankly. And in the future, it's going to be an even more scarce commodity. When we think about climate change that's happening, and we are really getting that this year with all the hurricanes we've dealt with and the fires in California. And so it's happening. And the best projection going forward for our part of the state is it's going to become much more drier than it is now. It's going to be more desert-like. So now is the time to secure the water we need to make sure that the consequences of not having water is something we don't have to deal with. Certainly, we think desal is a good option going forward, and you just have to look at how can you minimize the negative potential impacts of that. So our position is that the best way to do desal is to have your intake and discharge out in the ocean, say a mile offshore, some distance offshore. The reason being the ocean really is big and it moves. And so in this case, the answer to pollution is dilution. It's the old saw. And in some cases, it's not for real, but here it is because it's just volume. And the bigger the volume, the more quickly you can return that concentrated brine to normal seawater, the less time you have for negative impacts.
What if they were to say it's going to be built in the Inner Harbor? Mm-hmm. What then happens environmentally, or where would you stand on that?
Well, it's obviously for our part, it's not the ideal site, but we understand that there's issues that that goes into making these decisions, about availability of power and access to utilities, things like that. So we would ask, and they're trying to do this. I do believe they're doing their due diligence to look at the environmental issues related to having a plant there. And hoping that they can resolve those. And of course, we don't know that for sure yet. They're trying to do those studies, but they're looking at it as they should, as far as trying to make that determination.
What would the consequence be if a desal plant was built in the Inner Harbor environmentally?
Well, on one hand, perhaps the bay could handle the size of plant that they're talking about, for example. The water in Corpus Christi Bay doesn't turn over very quickly. It takes 1.4 years for the water to turn over. So when you're putting things into it, like concentrated brine, it will stay there for a long time unless it dilutes. But even as it dilutes, it slightly raises the salinity of the surrounding area. So a little bit of rise in salinity could be important, and they're trying to address that. The problem is, perhaps if their answer comes up that the bay can only hold so much brine and so they can't expand that plant, then they're stuck with a plant in the Inner Harbor that can't be enlarged when they really want to make it bigger when it works well. So they got to think about things like that. That's all we're saying. Just be sure and think about these long-term issues as you're making a decision.